Hi, it's Packy from the house, and today we're going to talk about some tips for two-handed bowling hand positions. Tune in. Today I'm going to talk about one thing Brighton does really well and two things that I think he could improve on. So the first thing that he does really well we're going to talk about is balance at the line. So his balance at the line, for me, that's a big thing. If you can balance at the line the same every time, then you can release it off your hand the same every time. You can know when something goes wrong. So you see right here, you see his leg kind of in line with the upper body, which is always really good to see. Even from a little earlier in the release, see his spine tilt and his leg pretty much match up at the release. So that's always something that's I think very important in terms of leverage, in terms of accuracy. If you can align your body if you can align, all the way foot through shoulder, that's huge. Just for accuracy, for power, for sustaining an entire block instead of just a game or one shot or two shots in a row. Makes it easier to repeat. And now the first thing that I think he can do a little better, and that's pretty much going to be the theme to this video, would be the starting position. So if he could bring the ball a little closer to his body, so if right here you see it, I wouldn't even call this his starting position, because as you see, the first thing he does with the ball is move it closer to his body. So this right here, maybe even up a little higher than this, is where I would like to see him start the ball. So you see the ball, if he could start it up a little bit higher right here, a little above hip level, I think that would be perfect for him. And it would create a little longer arm swing. It would create, the ability to create a little more leverage at the bottom. Instead of right now, you see when you start a ball that low, it's just the only way you can get it moving is with muscle. So you see he pushes it out, which takes muscle, and it creates a little stiffness in his game, where I think if he started it up a little higher, he could really just push it out in front of him and let the weight of the ball take over. Let the weight of the ball create your swing for you instead of having to pull it back or pull it down. He could really just let the ball do the work instead of having to do, instead of forcing the ball down the lane. So that's the first thing would be the starting position. You want to start it, at hip level, maybe a little above hip level, where you got pretty much a 90-degree bend at your elbow and a little closer to his body. So he starts it pretty far out right here, and then he moves it closer to him. As we go through the video, he goes closer to him, and then he pushes it back out again. So for me, that's just extra movement that doesn't really need to happen. So we'll just talk one quick summary right here. If he could start it, just a little higher than this, that's a good position in terms of it's just right in front of his body. And now if he could just bring it up into this region, at hip level, maybe a little above hip level, it would create for a much, much looser swing. The next thing we're going to talk about is in relation to this, because of the arm swing being so muscled, I think he uses, his hand gets pretty stiff at the top. So I'd like to see his hand kind of, you see it right behind the ball. I'd like to see it a little more underneath the ball. So it pretty much stays at like stiff position the whole way. So if he was a one-hander and you saw this stiff wrist at the top, or this, stiff wrist all the way through release, it'd be very hard for him to create rev rate. But since he is a two-hander, it does come back underneath the ball a little bit. That way he can generate some rev rate. But right here, I'd like to see his wrist just a little more relaxed. It's cupped. Can't really see it because this woman's head is blocking the way, but it does start to get cupped, and then it, stiffens up right here. And if he could just wrap his hand underneath the ball where his hand is in this area right here, I think it would just be a lot easier for him to create rev rate, and he wouldn't have to whip his hand around the side of the ball. He could keep it more up the back. So we'll talk about, that's the third thing that I would like to talk about, is his hand position at release. So you see his hand right here. The way The correct way to hook a bowling ball for me would be your hand up the back, and as your fingers are starting to come out of it, your hand rotates around the side. But you see here, his entire arm is starting to rotate around the side, and we'll see this as we go through. His entire hand and arm rotates from up the back to around the side, just a little too early. So if he could just get his elbow in and his forearm into the inside of the ball over here, he would create better ball roll, and he would just have an easier time throwing the ball and creating more consistent shots, which is the overall goal, is to create consistent shots every time so you can hit your target pretty easily, as well as generate the same amount of rev rate and rotation every single shot. So the three things we talked about in this video, we talked about the starting position. If he could start the ball, a little closer to his body, right in this range, to create a little less muscle. And then the second thing we talked about in this video, we talked about, trying to create a little looser wrist at the top where he can, come under here and cup the bottom of the ball instead of having this, this stiffer wrist at the top. And then the very last thing we talked about was at the bottom, if he could just keep his hand a little more behind the ball, keep his arm inside the ball, his elbow and his forearm inside the ball at release, instead of, you see at the release, right here, he's on the very outside of the ball. But, he's got a great start to his game. For me, the most important thing is balance, and he has that down, which is really good for me to see. Definitely a good starting position to just increase his average. It's not going to be too hard to make some of these changes. Some of them are going to take a little time to work at. But Brighton throws it really good, and I love to see him out here testing his skills at the USBC Championships. If you enjoyed this video and want a video of your own put on our YouTube channel, just click the link in the description for a 50% off discount code and upload your video.